I want to thank and welcome Reverend Tanya Dawson for being here from the Unity Center. Thank you. Yeah, perfect timing. How was that? It was a good intro, an intro for Reverend Tanya. We did this for the Unity service this morning at 8:30, and now we're doing it for you, and so we will see what kind of challenges you have for us today. Shuffle them. I will try and sort them, so hold on a minute. There we go. Hello.
Shall I talk about the slides while we're...
You want to, okay.
Okay. Am I on? Okay, I'm on. So you've got some handouts, and well, there's Eugene. Hi, Eugene. And we also have this on the big slide, so you can take or the PowerPoint, so you can see it. But you'll see on one side, there's very similar than what you have on the other side. But you'll see there's a few little differences. That's why I wanted to give them both to you. And you can see it's an eye chart, not exactly easy to read, so I thought you see it on the big screen, but it might be a little easier to take it home and get your magnifying glass out. So, also you'll see I gave you, there's a timeline that Bonnie has here of for Ernest Holmes and how things came about. And I wanted you to see some of the timeline for Unity as well, and that's also in your handout. The first 2 pages are up here, so you can come and look at this after the service if you want. And so you'll see the similarities in the teachers that were followed by both the Fillmores and Ernest Holmes, and you'll see a little bit about it in the story on here. But you can Google this and look this up just like I did. That's exactly what I did. Actually, this is an excerpt from a talk I gave earlier in the year, and you can go watch that if you want to. I gave you the name of the channel on YouTube there. And also, you'll notice in many of the New Thought family trees, as we've been calling it, that there's a man, his name Phineas Quimby. Anybody heard of Mr. Quimby? Mm-hmm. Good deal. Well, there's a little write-up of him over here. It's actually 4 pages worth, so I didn't actually add that to your handouts, but please take a look at it, and it's a nice website. You can go look up more all that you want, okay? And so anyone who doesn't have a question, we'll ask you the next one. No? Okay, all right.
Okay, so I'm trying to sort them somewhat so we can have some organization here. So the first one that I think we'll address, because that is the root of sort of why we're both answering these questions, is what is the difference between Unity and Science of Mind, and what are the similarities? Is mine on, or am I just not? Oh, I've got to do it straight in. How's that? There we go. And are prayer chaplains of Unity and practitioners the same? Yes and no. Yes and no.
No. Can I take that part? Mm-hmm. So part of it is this. So the practitioners excuse me, I'm getting the pick it up gesture. Okay, can you hear me okay? So practitioners in CSL are similar in nature to the licensed Unity teacher. I got this right, Pat? Licensed Unity teacher for Unity. And so the prayer chaplains that we have they're different people there.
That's
or they can be
the
same person.
The practitioners and the teacher, the licensed Unity teachers, go through a lot of training and take classes to get to the place that they are. For the practitioners, they have to take, I think it's 18 credits prior to the prac training, and then that's 2 years of 13 weeks each year of training. Before then they sit for a panel. They have to pass the panel before they're fully licensed. So there's a lot that goes into that process.
Yeah, it's not a online course.
Yeah, well,
it might be part of it.
Some of them that can be taken online, but it's not an overnight sort of thing. So in terms of what we were trying to show with this timeline, would you hold it for me a minute? Is the Fillmores who founded Unity, their timeline is here, and Emma Curtis Hopkins is a teacher that the Fillmores and Ernest Holmes studied with. And Ernest Holmes is here. He was a little younger than these guys, but he definitely studied them and has roots in what they were teaching and what was being taught around the world. So basically, what we teach at CSL and what Unity teaches has roots from the same place. We sort of grew up in different parts of the country. CSL, which was originally the religious science, First Church of Religious Science, started in California area, and Unity is from the Kansas City area. And this was, like I told folks before the internet, before we had a lot of easy access to travel the way we do today, and before we had television that showed us what was going on and all over the world. So the two sister communities grew up in different parts of this country, but are very much connected and teach. The 5 basic principles of Unity are very similar to the same principles that we teach. So. Emily Cady, that I don't know.
That's a good question.
That's a Unity question. You're the Unity person.
That's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's she from?
Emily Cady from?
I believe that she was also from the Midwest.
Midwest, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Minnesota? Okay, yeah, so, because Emma Curtis Hopkins was in Chicago for a while, and that's where the Fillmores worked with her, and then she moved back to New York, and Ernest Holmes went and studied with her in New York, was one of the last students there. Mary? What was the era? The era? Okay, so what we have here is Emma Curtis Hopkins was the editor of the Christian Science Journal in 1884, and her first class out on her own was in 1888. Okay, and then the Fillmores started the Unity Church 1906 here, and Holmes wrote his book back in 1924 when he studied with her about in that era. So we're looking early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s.
And in your handout, you'll see the dates when the Fillmores first were inspired to begin the Unity movement, which I believe was 1884. Do I have that right?
And Christian Science, but was started way back. Mary Baker Eddy was born in 1821, and let's see, she started her lectures in 1866. So, yeah, and they are rooted back to her. Mm-hmm. And so that gives you some of the framework. And part of what was important to me about this timeline also is that the first economic depression was right in this era. The Great Depression was right here, and World War I was here, and World War II was here. So you can see that these folks were talking about this and bringing this teaching at a time, throughout our history when there was a lot of stuff going on. So it's not just our time that has stuff. It's been throughout history.
I'd like to add, too, that if you think about the turmoil and the struggles that they had in the backs of their minds and in their hearts as they developed and shared their teachings, and how it may have influenced, and how ours today may influence ours today, it's interesting to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And the
but
suffragettes.
I all these too. So what? Yes, if you look at the sheets that you were handed, you have a sheet that goes back, and this doesn't even go all the way back because we go back to the Greeks and the Greek philosophers. And so some of what was studied is there. I know Ernest Holmes studied the Upanishads in Hinduism. They studied all the different sacred scriptures. So they
As
were
did Fillmore.
and did the Fillmores. So they're pulling in from a lot of ancient traditions. That's why it was called New Thought, even though we're talking about time in our past. The idea was bringing a new way of thinking to some of these older teachings.
And the other thing is if you look into these transcendentalists, Emerson, a lot of theirs harken back to the Greeks, and some to the Egyptians. So, okay, well, let's get on the stack here.
Okay. Alrighty, so it's like how to put this together. So one of the questions has to do with how does Unity and CSL address in the beginning or the idea of evolution? You're looking at me? Again, one of the things that we are about is a metaphysical interpretation of the Bible. And so if we're talking about in the beginning and we're using those scriptures, we're looking at metaphysical interpretations of that. And so Holmes constantly talks about evolution and the fact that we're evolving spiritually, emotionally, physically, that we're part of that process, and that spirit, consciousness, God is in and through all of creation. And I believe that's part of one of your things here, too.
Yes, yes. And actually, I'd like to point out that these principles are a slightly different wording than the handout that you got. The little square, you'll see that is actually the latest and greatest that Unity has evolved their principles into. And so, I've never heard any Unity person blast the creationist theory or say the evolutionist theory is the only way to go. I'm sure privately people, like everywhere, have their own opinions. But just like Bonnie mentioned, that we are all evolving. I was actually talking to a friend of mine earlier today, that we are all evolving. As we grow inside, as we vibrate, we attract newer and different things and newer understandings. And as our understandings grow, we evolve. So in evolution, I would say absolutely, but not necessarily the way in which the question was couched.
And one of the other things about our history that was brought up to me in between the services is that many people know Christian Science for its work around healing, physical healing. And our roots go back to physical healing also. Myrtle Fillmore had an amazing healing story that got her started on her path. And Ernest Holmes had a place where you could go in California for healing, and it was all prayer work. It was a sanitarium, I think is how they referred to it, and you could go and spend time there and have people pray with you and spend time in your own contemplation and prayer. So the roots, again, of this entire movement had to do with physical healing and seeing it expressed in our physical well-being. It's evolved to include the health of relationships, our emotional health, and abundant health, all of those different aspects of our life. But the roots are definitely in physical healing.
Yes, if anyone can come up with a picture or any more information than I already have on a doctor by the name of E.B. Weeks, I might have something for you. I have not been able to find a picture of this woman, but it was her that they heard this lecture in Chicago, and her that made the statement that she made, and the quote is in the handout about let me just read it here. I'm a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness. She had a spiritual experience within her body that went from her toes to the top of her head. I mean, we all talk about angel bumps or goosebumps, but this was in every center of her being. And it was that experience that inspired the Fillmores to create the Unity movement. So, and very, very much so, roots in healing.
And one of the questions here is the nomenclature used in New Thought makes it hard for me to listen without translating for myself, like spiritual mind treatment, and the different parts of the logo for Science of Mind, which are up there in our teaching symbol. So again, the idea, the word treatment goes all the way back to Christian Science, and their practitioners were treating for their health. And it was seen back when I was in college, I actually studied in a women's history class. Mary Baker Eddy came up because in her era, the medical field and how it treated women was not the greatest for women. That was back in the days of leeches and hot pokers and believing that women would be happier if they stayed in bed and got fat because it emulated pregnancy. And so that was supposed to make her feel better. So Mary Baker Eddy was like, I'm not listening to this. I'm taking my own health into my own hands. I know that spirit heals through me. And she sought out ways to heal herself and not have to move into that arena of medicine that was going on then. And so that's why to this day, Christian Science does not use medical doctors. religious science and unity has moved to the place where we see God in all things, and so we work with you in the prayer side, the spirit side, while you work with your doctors on the physical on that level. So that's an evolution, again, in the thought processes of how this works. So that's where the word treatment comes from, so maybe that gives a little light to that. And the word practitioner goes back to there too. The Christian Science uses the same term for practitioner.
I think the notion of practice and practitioner and practical, all those prac words, that we're talking about doing something in action, taking it from the spirit and moving from the invisible to the visible, from the spirit to the earth plane, and so that you're manifesting, you're creating, and it's a practice, not just an intellectual, what I like to call the metaphysical armchair or the armchair metaphysician, right?
Or the mental gymnastics is the other one. So part of what she just said is in the logo. So the V in the logo is the idea of spirit moving down into the bottom section, which is manifestation. And it moves through the center section, which is the law. And so that is the idea that the teaching talks about, is that we're taking the spirit and moving it through the law into manifestation. And that's what prayer is about. So one of this questions, there's a couple of things here related to how do we bring forth the emotion and faith needed for affirmative prayer, and how do we handle having affirmed something but then it doesn't happen. So I guess we could start with those two.
All right.
So how do we bring back about the emotion and faith needed for affirmative prayer? And affirmative prayer is, again, another term for treatment. They're interchangeable. Mm-hmm. You want to go?
Am I taking that?
Go.
Okay. I kind of revealed a little bit about this, an experience I had in the first service. So if you've heard this, okay, you get to hear it again. Isn't that great? So this is what happened. So most of you know that I lost my sister Paula last November. Right before Reverend Terry came and asked me about doing this job here. But before that, in the summer, Paula was doing not very well, and I was ordained in a little metaphysical spiritualist church in Tucson, and the man who ordained me is still the minister there. He's a co-pastor there, and this was what was happening. I was so afraid of losing her that I felt that my fear would be infused in my healing energy that I was sending her. And I didn't want that to be part of what she was receiving. And so I called David and I said, what happened? I explained it to him, and he says to me, well, what for you is the opposite of fear? And I said, well, love, I guess, but I'm not sure that works right now, because I was so afraid of losing her to what was going on with her. And he said, well, what else? And I said, well, courage. Courage to. And he said, well, that's what you'll put in there. You'll start with courage. You'll start with courage. And so courage was the stepping stone that I used in this case. We all have stories, right? And we all use different ways. But in this case, I used courage as a stepping stone to my faith. That once I could put my courage and share my courage in my healing energy with Paula, and then when I was able to believe that it was happening, I had that faith that God was working through me again. I was cutting myself off because I didn't want to share that healing energy, because I was literally afraid. And so when I was able to relax and let go and believe that I was doing the right thing, that courage and bring that healing energy to Paula, then it was the faith that I knew she was receiving it in whatever divine way it was meant to be, in whatever divine order it was meant to be. And that was how I did it.
So there's one step. We also have a process that we use in some of our classes called Fear to Faith, and it's a worksheet that you can use, and you can actually find it online. They did not copyright it. They left it open for everyone to make use of and have access to. And the process that takes you through is looking at what it is you fear to really get a sense of it and allowing yourself to imagine that happening so that you can see in your mind's eye that you live through it. That even just imagining it, you can get through it. And then you start imagining what it is you really want and putting your focus there. And sometimes what we're looking for are some of the beliefs that we've taken on that cause those fears, and how do we heal from those beliefs? Maybe we took on a belief when we were little that we weren't worthy of something, or that we didn't deserve to have our good. That we, whatever it is, whatever messages we might have picked up from our caregivers, from our teachers, from the media, whatever it is, we need to do that inner work and healing work that can allow us to move out of our fears and into faith or that belief that we are on the right track. And so one of these questions here is then how do we handle it when we've affirmed something but it doesn't happen? And so going back to that original question, what are practitioners and licensed teachers? These are the people that are trained to work with you. And all of us, even ministers, still have their own practitioners and their prayer partners, because when we're in the midst of something, we need the help of someone else to see that bigger picture for us and with us. So take some of those issues to the practitioners and let them work with you to see where there might be a blockage that you're not even aware of in your belief system and in your subconscious that's not allowing things to manifest as you're wanting them to.
May I add something? Have anyone heard of this before? This or something better. You know, or that country song, "Thank God for Unanswered Prayers." Who was that? Garth Brooks. I don't know. Anyway, because sometimes the blocks that she's talking about that the CSL process will help you unearth. Sometimes those are the things that are standing in the way of the manifestation, right? Or sometimes we're saying something out one side of the mouth and then we're on the other side of the mouth, and they're not this cohesive, right? Because it was like, you know, it's like I'm afraid over here, but please bring me this, right? So it's important to be of one mind. Within ourselves, be of one mind, and you know, what do they also say? The little engine that could, you know, sometimes it's God's time, divine time, not necessarily our time, but that's also part of that faith, knowing that this or something better, because sometimes we don't always think big enough for us, do we?
And so another related question I think here is, what is the best practice for understanding, and there's a squiggle, I don't know what that means, in oneness. So I'm imagining what is the best practice for fully understanding our oneness and what oneness means. So she's looking back at me. So how do we do that? Again, I think, you know, the different things that we're harping from up here all the time, meditation, prayer, taking time to really connect inside with who we are and recognizing that within all people and all things. And
then taking what you do there and expressing them in your thoughts, words, and actions and feelings. So it's thoughts, words, and actions. So that includes visualizations and always keeping that one mind. So it's like we affirm for something, and we keep affirming for that. But we don't stop in the midst of that. Let's say take a break on Wednesday and say, all the horrible things, why this hasn't happened yet. But we keep that one mind, that we keep that focus so that our thoughts, words, and actions are all one. So I'm saying what I'm thinking, and I'm acting on those same thoughts and words. So everything is lined up.
And so this next question, how do you protect yourself spiritually when you're surrounded by negativity? And so again, we're talking about where do we keep our focus? What are we focused on? We've talked about the fact that Holmes said, stand for something and against nothing. So if in the middle of the week we start to do the complaining, the harping, we've shifted ourselves over into negativity. And so we need to keep that focus on what we want. So I'm often asking myself and others, what do you really want? And we ask that over and over till we get to the real basic answer. Because sometimes we'll say we think we want X, Y, and Z, but when you spend some time really asking that question over and over, you'll get to the bottom of what you really want. And often people who are in negativity, if we ask them that question, what do you want? Sometimes they don't even know. But it helps to move them to what they want instead of just focusing on what they don't want.
May I add something to that? So what she said, and then also, I'd like to just say, some of us may, I'm not saying I'm one, but some of us may have a news addiction, in which case y'all get all up in the arms about things, and say, well, that negativity's out there, what's this and that, the end of the world, the climate change, this and that and the other thing. So what I always suggest is this. Remember, and she's probably going to say this at some point anyway, but how'd you put it? What you think is what you get, or
Yeah,
that's
what you
how
focus on is what you get.
Choose your thoughts well. So, do I want to focus on somebody running around being silly and causing uproar, or do I want to focus on what I'd rather see? So I'm going to imagine and visualize what I want. Am I going to focus on the polar ice caps looking a certain way like they do on the news, or do I want to focus on the polar ice caps looking the way that I visualize them? A happy polar bear, a dancing happy polar bear, right? And all her babies, and see what I'm saying? So we focus on what we want to happen, just exactly what she was saying, and not be drugged into. Now, there was another part of that question I'd like to address, if that's okay, and that's the protection part. Yeah. So, in Unity we have something called the prayer of protection. There's no people here who they don't leave the house without protecting themselves. I tell the spousal unit every time he runs away to go off to his war work, shields up, put your shields up, and put it around the car. He knows what I'm talking about. Because we not only are we petitioning and saying in gratitude, thank you for this protection, but we're also mentally bringing our focus into that. So I know that I'm here. I know that I'm protected. I, as a spiritualist minister, have often had the question about how do I protect myself from outside energies, and so the same thing, What you focus on, what you focus on, you get more of. It just happens. And so we focus on protection. I can't say it. I can't say it. Daniel can say it for me. Daniel, say it for me.
The light of God surrounds me. The love of God enfolds me. The power of God protects me. The presence of God watches over me.
There we go.
Wherever I am, God is.
That's right.
Yeah.
I have to read it myself.
I have that in my car, but I don't have it memorized. I keep it on the
don't either.
dashboard of my car. And in terms of negativity, too, one of the things I find is sometimes if I'm feeling really grumpy or impacted by the negativity, I go back to that love practice that I've talked about before, just starting to say, start with myself, I love my family, I name them, I love the board members, I name them, I love all the practitioners, I name them, I name every person who volunteers, who walks through these doors, I see your face, and as I start loving everything, that shifts my energy, and it helps me to feel, to me, that's that protection of love that's surrounding me, is knowing that I just want to move in that arena and not in the arena of negativity. Let's see. So
focus on what you want.
Focus on what you want, which is love. The simplest way to communicate to others the basic premise of new thought, and that's always a challenge. And so it's one of the homework assignments in many of our classes is think about how you would describe this to maybe someone else in your family, to somebody who has a different belief system, to a child, to a teenager, for me, it was having to explain it to the radical feminists in my life, because I was coming from that angle where I was trying to justify being a part of an organized religion where other people were trying to explain it to the people involved in other organized religions. So we all have different people that we are trying to share this with. So I would suggest taking the time to figure out what seems real for you. How do you explain it? How does it show up in your life? The main thing that I talk about is the positive thinking, and what we focus on we get, and how we work our way into that arena.
And the second one, that's two biggies, in my opinion. That's the one biggie, and the other biggie is the God is inside of us. The divine is inside of us. Yep. The universe is inside of us, not floating on some island in the sky. Two biggies.
And the third one is that we don't judge. We really work hard on not judging, and there isn't a God out there judging us. And that's the one that usually perks people's eyes and ears up when I say, we don't tell you that you're a sinner, that you're bad. We tell you that you're a beautiful divine expression of the one. And they kind of go, wow, really? So I usually also focus on that that you are part of God's creation and God's expressing through you. So this is teeny tiny writing. So I'm going to let you answer this while I try and decipher the little writing.
Okay.
Well, this one says, how does unity define love?
How does unity define love? That sounds like a question that you would get in the seminary. What is love? Has anyone ever had to define love before? I got to say this. As a student, young student, I took it upon myself to write about this. Well, I was having love problems anyway. I forget. I must have been 20, 21. And so I decided I was writing a dissertation in my journal on love, and I had every intention of teaching it at some point in my life. Thank God I didn't. But I want to say that my definition and my idea and my understanding of love has definitely evolved since then. And the other thing is that when we teach or we give a talk on a subject, haven't you found this? That when you talk on that topic, you actually live it that week?
Oh, yeah.
So I had to do a class on love. It wasn't too long after I was writing that. Oh, man, not too much fun, huh?
Yeah. And just so you know, too, this is why I encourage you to go to a practitioner or a teacher for some prayer work, because we also say whatever shows up for us to pray about, so what you present to us is exactly what we need to take care of in our own lives.
Say what?
So it's a gift, yeah. It's a gift to the practitioner when you bring that forward, because they get to look at it and heal it within themselves. That's the only place we do the healing work, is within ourselves. And because we are one, it helps to impact your life. We're working with you in that process. But when you bring that to us, it's a gift, because we get to look within ourselves and do that healing work. So this is another question, and we're getting close on time. Here it is that in most religions there's space for the concept of mystery. I haven't been attending for a long time, but is a sense of mystery incorporated in the belief structure here? You want to answer?
I think so.
I think so, yeah. Now, mystery, I'm assuming in this sense also refers to sort of that mystical experience, that idea of having a sense of an experience of the mystical, and that is definitely something that the teachers of all this, and those of us who really try and practice it, that's what we're aiming for, is that mystical experience. Yeah, and we teach you'll hear about it in classes as well as in what we say, but the mystery is going to be yours. Each person has their own experience of that. I can't download and hand the chip to you. It has to be part of your own practice. So the last three questions here, and again, if you want more in depth on any of this, I'm sure you can make an appointment with Reverend Tanya, you can make appointments with me, and you can also check in with a practitioner and ask for more in-depth answers to these questions. These were all personal to us. What activities cause you to feel like you're living life to the fullest? What actions in your life do you feel will have the longest reaching consequences? And why are humans so susceptible to magical thinking? Yeah. So in terms of the personal, I guess, one of the things for me is that I started very young having a relationship with something that was bigger than me. And it might amuse you. I don't know, some of you might already know this. I tend to be inside a very rebellious person. And I've struggled with that my whole life because I was one of those kids, you tell me don't do this, and that's exactly what I want to do. So one of the things that my father especially didn't like was church and religion. So, of course, that's how I rebelled, was going to church. And so it brought it in a different arena for me. And so I would sneak on Saturday mornings and listen to the stories of the Bible that Mary Baker Eddy put together in Records for Kids from Christian Science, because my parents come out of that background. So that was being devious for me, was listening to this stuff. And I loved it, and it spoke to me. And when my parents, in those days, we stayed home alone when we were sick. Our parents were gone. And I would sneak and get the children's book of Bible stories, and I would read it to myself. So I was weird. But it was something that drew me from an early age, and it was part of my rebellion in a way. I was one of the few people I knew that wasn't doing sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I grew up in Southern California in the 60s and 70s, so it was my rebellion, and I made a conscious decision to let it be my rebellion because I knew that if I gave in to other things, I might not be here today. I might not have survived other choices. So for me, that's been the longest reaching consequences, is being very conscious of my rebellious nature, looking at my options at a very young age and making the choice to go in this direction.
I think I've recently come to understand that the longest reaching, both in distance and time, of my impact in the world I've walked, is how I've responded to or spoke and interacted with other human beings and critters as well.
And it's 11:30. Doesn't time go fast when we're having fun? So maybe we will each address this magical thinking question on our own and other.
I love the magic question.
Go for it.
Yeah, I love it. You know, there's mystery in magic wherever you want it to be. You just have to look.
And so this is susceptible to magical thinking, which I think the person means maybe not having clear thinking or
You mean La La Land thinking?
Yeah. And maybe it's just part of the human experience that we get to figure it all out. You know, we come in with all these options, and that's part of the excitement for me. And we get to figure out which ones of these options feel right. We get to go within and do that inner work to see how we're divinely guided. And one of the things that I really like about this teaching is that I'm not here to tell you how to run your life.
No.
I'm here to show you things that have worked for me and let you figure it out and give you things to read, things to think about, little seeds, but I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong for you. And that's the blessing.
Sometimes allowing is just allowing is okay.
Yeah.
Just allow sometimes. Have fun.
Have fun. So I see that it's time for us to move into inner prayer, inner work. Just take a moment to go within. And think about those questions that have not been asked. And think about the questions that were asked. And know that also what we believe is that within each and every one of us is that divine mind. We are God expressing. That means that with every question we have, the answer is already present within us. Let that just sink in as you know that every answer to every question you have is already there. The question and the answer are developed at the same time. So we open our hearts and minds to those questions and to the listening that brings about the answers. We give great thanks for this spirit, this life, this love, this energy that moves in and through us at all times, boosting us forward, providing for us a way of life that brings about greater and greater and greater manifestations. And so it's with a grateful heart that I release these words, knowing that it is already so, that we are that divine, perfect expression of Spirit, and so it is.